It's your boy, Roy George Phillip, the first.
And it's Samantha and Zessie.
And this is Masculinity.
The show that investigates the performance of masculinity in the world today. And you know we spell it with that hard K.
So, Samantha.
Yes, Ramoy.
Shouldn't you be asking me a question?
And what would that question be?
So you were asked a question relatively recently of a proposal variety, am I right?
Oh, I was.
I feel that, now you owe it to me on air, on mic, to, ask me to be your wedding officiant, no?
Oh, my God. What? You officiate weddings? I would love for you to be my wedding officiant. Are you?
Wow, it's finally happening.
Will you be my wedding officiant? Oh, my God.
Is this official on the air? It's happening? Wow.
I mean, yeah, I have requirements for what you have to wear, but sure.
Noted.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
You heard it here first, audience.
I know. Amazing. Okay. Great. Well, now that that's settled, today we're joined by a very special guest. So everyone, welcome. Put your hands together for masculinity scholar and accountability strategist, Nalo Zidane.
Hey, now.
Nalo, welcome.
Hey, now. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here. So, since you're a scholar, I have a little pop quiz for you, Nalo.
Oh, my goodness.
What are we talking about on the show today?
We're talking about masculinity in hip-hop and accountability.
We'll see if Nalo makes good on her word. That's coming up right after this break.
Curious about next-gen men? We're a small part of a much larger movement to undefine masculinity for a brighter future. Our mission is clear: empower the next generation to use their curiosity, empathy, and courage to build a more equitable world. Join the Next Gen Men community as we learn and unlearn together. We're here to support boys and men to break free from limiting stereotypes. We're not just an organization, we're a catalyst for reimagining masculinity and fostering inclusivity. We're here to help open up possibilities for what men and boys can be. Explore the world of Next Gen Men at nextgenmen.ca and join the community to make a difference. Next Gen Men, shaping tomorrow's leaders one step at a time. Join us and help undefine masculinity and empower the next generation of men to lead with empathy and courage.
Welcome back. Yes, so our guest today is masculinity scholar Nalo Zidane. Did I say that correctly?
You did. Thank you so much.
So Samantha tells us you're also an accountability strategist.
I am.
What exactly is that?
Accountability strategy is a way that I am forming a kind of body of knowledge that seeks to reach, I guess, what I consider guidance points that are missed when raising oppressed peoples in poverty. And a lot of times we talk about accountability, but we don't talk about our access to the knowing better. We just have an expectation that we should know better. But we don't even have a clarity around what the should know better even means. And with the way that, oppression and socialization touches us, I think there needs to be a point where we can say, how do we get access to people without, pulling on their dignity or telling them they're bad people in order to get them information they need to be accountable, integrity-based folks. And that's the kind of strategy I seek to, hopefully help others embody, because I believe more in justice that's non-punitive and community-oriented than I do ones that are, kind of patriarchal and power-mongering and all these things. I think it prohibits actual justice.
God, that's such a great thing. I don't think I've ever met an accountability strategist. So welcome and thank you for gracing us with not only your work, but just that thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
For sure. Accountability, community are definitely the right terms here, because boy, do we need to talk about some accountability.
Talk to me.
Totally.
Exactly. So this is our second episode in our music series. In our first episode, we played a little bit of music lyric trivia.
And I totally won.
Did you? Did you win?
Okay, so I let Herman win. Let's just say that I let him win.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and keep on telling yourself that, Ramoy? Whatever helps you sleep at night. No worries. So today I want to build off that last week's game, the one I geniusly called Parole de patriarchy.
Wow.
Nalo, I'm actually French, so this was the
wow.
The French sweet nothings continue. Wow.
Let's go.
Yes. So we're going to keep looking at some lyrics, but this time linked to kind of like a larger historical framework, and that's one that connects us to this day. All right?
I ain't mad at that. Let's go.
Good luck to me.
No, you'll be good. You'll be good. All right, so Nalo and listeners, I'm going to read some lyrics here, and Ramoy has got to guess the song and the artist. All right, so You may know this one, Nalo, but let's go ahead and let Ramoy see if he can get it.
All right, no pressure.
All the pressure. No. All right, here we go. So I said you need a man who's got finesse, and his whole name across his chest. He may be able to fly all through the night, but can he rock a party till the early light? He can't satisfy you with his little worm, but I can bust you out with my super sperm. So go ahead, Ramoy. Let us know what you think this is.
I mean, like in the scheme of the old game, it's like totally masking masculinity, like super sperm and all. But I don't think that's the game today, right?
But you gotta tell me the song, man. That's the game.
Yeah, it's definitely an old bop. It's like I would dominate in these games, but the thing is, my brain be too big. It's like too big now. You know what I mean? No?
I don't know if that's it, though. I don't know if that's it. Super brain, super... I'm not going to say it. But, okay, let's try again. Let's try again. All right, so same song, but with a different set of, like, let's say maybe easier lyrics.
Okay, thank you.
So I said a hip, hop, a hip it to the hip hop, and you don't stop. They're rocking it. Okay,
this is Rapper's Delight. Yes. Sugarhill game. Yeah.
He did it, Nalo. He did it. You need a couple hands.
Yeah.
So now you two actually may know this, but this is officially the first commercially released rap song back in 1979, right? So it came out of Harlem. And now when I say that, what does that bring to mind? Like, what do you picture is the music scene in 1970s Harlem?
I'm thinking just like beautiful gold chains and like silk shirts and like lounges and vibes like that, right?
You're correct, Ramoy. So Rapper's Delight, Sugarhill Gang, they're coming out in Harlem in the late 1970s. Bell bottoms, big afros. This is the scene of music lounges, nightly soul trains. And at this time, there's a whole slew of DJs, right? Music producers, groups of poets, rappers, these different collections of MCs and musicians just all giving voice to the community, right? Now, for some additional context, this is the Harlem 10 years after the Civil Rights era, in a decade where there's a huge financial crisis, especially in the city, that's like making city life untenable for some. And white flight, of course, is happening where huge like swaths of middle class, predominantly white families are just like fleeing to the suburbs, right? And that's leaving certain neighborhoods especially vulnerable. So now, if Rapper's Delight is the first widely distributed rap song, and as Ramoy pointed out, it's signaling this hyper masculinity and all this lyrical penile prowess, right? It's also communicating some other messages as well. So let me read one set of last lyrics for y'all. So I got bodyguards. I'm stopping myself from like trying to rap. I got bodyguards. I got 2 big cars. That definitely ain't the whack. I got a Lincoln Continental and a sunroof Cadillac. So after school, I take a dip in the pool, which is really on the wall. I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. So what do these lyrics elicit in you, Ramoy?
I mean, other than the Knicks playing basketball? I mean, come on.
I mean, yeah, obviously.
No, I get it. Yeah, it's definitely playing up like stacking cash, being rich as shit, like flexing in this real like wealth is power way. And inevitably that kind of connects us to this narrative of like masculinity and gender performance with the hard K in a way.
I think so too. And actually, Nalo, what does it elicit for you?
I think it definitely does something similar. And I also believe that there's a way that it's trying to reinforce or continue to establish those power kind of models as valid and as ones that we should accept from him. So like, You show them the girl on the wall and the money and the Knicks game. You don't mention that because it's nothing, because they know how much it costs. So it's like, I'm telling you, this money is still power.
I think so too. And I want to kind of get into the story behind this song, right? So, all right, I'm going to take y'all back. It's 1979, and Sylvia Robinson is a music producer whose label, All Platinum Records, has just failed and is on the verge of bankruptcy. She goes to a party at a club in Harlem, and a light bulb goes off when she hears the crowd going wild at Lovebug Starsky, who is DJing and rhyming over the beat, and she's never heard that before. So she sends her nephew out to find some folks in this burgeoning rap scene to see who could be profitable, right? So he introduces her to Big Bank Hank, who auditions for her right outside the New Jersey pizza parlor that he's working at. Sauce and like flour, like no kidding, that's actually how he came out. And just as he's doing that, Master G, who's another MC, happens to be walking by as this happens, and he auditions as well. Her nephew also introduces her to Wonder Mike. The three rappers, they're all from Inglewood, New Jersey. And so what happens is that Sylvia can't choose between them. So she casts all of them into like this super group band and starts getting their music on local radio stations. That's basically how the Sugarhill Gang is born.
Yeah, it kind of like sounds like Clive Davis, like 1.0 making the band, like
yeah.
Or that model, at least.
I mean, to be honest, if we're talking about making the band, I'm going to go ahead and say Diddy. So this same old story of finding great art makers, right? Steal their work, repackage it into some mass appeal product that you can profit off of. Because you see, it quickly gets understood that this new group, Sugarhill Gang, are borrowing, quote unquote, lyrics that are already heard, right? Across the water from New Jersey, in Harlem and Bronx clubs. So actual hip-hop pioneers, I'm talking legends like Grandmaster Caz of Cold Crush Brothers, DJ Hollywood, end up hearing their own words on the radio from people who were completely unknown to the community that hip-hop was actually from. So basically reproduce for mass international consumption instead of for the community, which is how it started. So it's like hip-hop culture from its earliest days ends up being appropriated and it's dumbed down to kind of fit into this like tunnel vision version of materialism and sex. And so I'm just kind of wondering, like, Nalo, did you actually know this story?
No, I didn't. This is my first time hearing it for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Like, I'm happy we're talking about this.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be too reductive or anything, but it's like these themes have been so prevalent in hip hop and rap for like the last 40 years, but knowing like where they come from in this way and how they were made and like, but also like stolen and like repurposed in ways just to be like commercial. I don't know. It's kind of wild to see how that messages and that story thread still exists.
Yeah, it also might like have like that kind of fabric too, where it's like, I want power. These are the power. This is the version of power that is available to me through the medium of like money or visibility or whatever, and like marketing that to say like I got some of that. So it definitely makes sense that was a survival tool also at the time to say that you are a person who is navigating, your hardships, but also, they can't keep you down from making some money from being seen.
That's a beautiful twist to that. Before we get there, let's talk about the present, because there are some interesting threads to connect to, right? And it's just a matter of knowing where to look and where to listen. So I'm wondering, have either of you heard of the artist Saba before? S-A-B-A.
Name sounds familiar, like on a feature or something.
Sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things where I had heard of Saba, but like I didn't know it was Saba until I was like, oh, this is Saba. So what about the group Ghetto Sage?
That I can't say I've heard of, but it's a dope name.
It sounds familiar again, but not confidently enough.
So let's say that Ghetto Sage is like these other guys from back in the 70s and the 80s, like similar to those pioneers like Grandmaster Caz and DJ Hollywood, who spoke truth, right? Spoke of their experience, but are inevitably kind of excluded from the mainstream, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like, like kind of like fringe rap in a way, or like in the fringes, speaking more honestly, but it's not considered
Marketable.
profitable in the mainstream. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So it's like rap that's like, you know, it's good and it's like making some headway, but it's not going to be on your top 10 on the radio, right? So Ghetto Sage is from Chicago. And essentially it's Saba, No Name, and Smino. So each rapper has made efforts to educate audiences, right? And to disrupt hip hop as it is in some way. And so Nalo, as a scholar, I feel like you may be familiar with No Name.
I know that No Name is really brilliant, and I love their brand of music composure and producing. I also love the way that they made an attempt at de-escalating or divesting from their initial investment in capitalism by kind of removing her money from certain avenues of wealth, specifically so that she could create and put the music out there, still feed the people she's trying to feed, but not trying to just take because it's there to have. And I really honored her contribution to hip hop just in the way she practices around money.
Love that. About to get into it. So for those of you who don't know, No Name came out in the mid 2010s and quickly was acclaimed as a really talented MC, right? People thought she was on the level of Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, and other highly respected female MCs. But No Name has a very different persona, right? She's like a poet's poet. She's not the twerking type, which is not a judgment. Shout out to the twerkers. It's just a fact. And she tends to get political in her music. So where No Name is disrupting what it looks like and sounds like to be a female MC, Saba is also disrupting what a male rapper is by being vulnerable about his experience.
Yeah, let's go with that vulnerability. Let's go with that honesty, baby. Let's go.
Right. So where Sugarhill Gang rose to the top of the charts with a message of kind of like luxury and sex, you know, like something to inspire to, besides the turbulence of life in 80s New York City, Saba goes a different route. So let me read some lyrics for y'all. I still get nostalgic seeing houses that my family lost. They wished upon a star. I caught it like I'm Randy Moss. When Granny fought for her property, she would turn down any cost. Now, what are you two hearing in this song?
I mean, I'm hearing some like honest storytelling. Like it's not trying to like flex in any particular way per se, but really just trying to share a story, an intimate story that may not be for mass audiences, but that people can really relate to in certain ways.
And also I think that there's a placement that the artist is kind of pronouncing a little bit more, which is like, we got values over here we can't be bought in a certain way. Because even the mention of the grandmother, when they mention like, you know, no matter what the cost is, you can't write a check to give up our family house, you know, right? Like he's also establishing like, I could get this paper, but I also want you to know that I'm not somebody to be bought. So everything that he's had, he's earned. And I think that was an important emphasis too that I heard.
So what differences do you hear between this in contrast to like A Rapper's Delight?
I would say the difference would be the conditions they're speaking from. They clearly have a different relationship to money, relationship to risk with how they're communicating these things. But before I'd say that means anything about them as a person, I'd rather move toward the direction of like it meaning that certain conditions and shaping and understandings about life through our survival languages and beyond have created a set of conditions that make, you know, their relationship to money something they either have access to or that they're using to survive. And I think those responses sound different, but I don't think that it, for me, changes the fact that I still hear, you know, a Black man trying to make it. Another story of that.
We can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, there's speaking to experiences that are coming from an experience at two different angles, right? So one that's looking at a little bit more performative and prominence in this kind of way of like having and things of that nature versus one that's coming at it from an honest trajectory. We can't say one is more valid than the other, but it's noting that there are differences here, and that's okay.
For sure.
So here's a little more from this song called Free Samples. I'm the grandson of Carl who lived across from the Fosters, then fostered me to spread love through holiday poverty. Hand-me-downs I was given, I thought they were bought for me. A tale of two Chicagos, this gets confused commonly. Now this feels like special.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like speaking to family in this very particular way, talking about love in the context of like family and holidays versus in the sense of like extreme like sexual caricaturization. Like it's interesting. Like there's such intimacy here that is really, at least it's cool for me to hear.
Yeah, for sure. I also love the idea of like speaking to, there was like this chosen family component that I heard just talking about, even the handing downs this person got, like it came from wherever it came from, but somebody was extending that toward them. And maybe that was an insinuation toward what family meant to them too. As like not just being some connected by blood, but like sometimes you don't choose your family and you still, recognize the blessing of connection with other people who care about your life, I love them lyrics.
I mean, it's just so vulnerable, right? And it's just something that,
Very.
I don't know, in hip hop, it's not something that is always prized. And so it's so nice to have that, have this artist that, is thriving and is known, not necessarily mainstream, but is known and being so real. So Saba has actually talked about how classist hip hop can be and how he feels like it's his responsibility to go against that grain. He mentioned rapping for the folks who still manage to finesse an Uber or a bus ticket, even if they have no money to get around Chicago.
Yeah, like rap for the people, baby. Let's go.
He's like real. And so I bring this up because, of course, there's this like contrast between that and Rapper's Delight, right? But there's also like Saba's music isn't afraid to be honest rather than like some facade of like a rapper who's like flexing their status, like real or not real, right? So like what's interesting is that he's branded as conscious rap, which in some ways comes with like good and bad connotations, right? Like, what do you guys think about that?
It's just like more like of a shitty situation in this country that's can be so divisive around like anti-intellectualism or like anti consciousness, like where if you're branded as conscious hip hop, some people could disqualify that in a certain way for being conscious, in the same way that it's like, if you aren't participating in the mainstream way or like not flexing in a specific way, you're kind of deemed left or too smart or too something in a way that is othering, which is a challenge.
For sure, definitely. I also think it reveals, like, as a society, the direction of what is interesting to us and how much of the actual labor we're willing to take on for our impact. So when we see, like, that fast-paced life and people making poor decisions and getting away with it or, paying their way out of whatever, I think all those things kind of tell that story through the impression of, like, that self-made imagery, like, I'm good. And I wonder, how, like, in the telling of those stories, being real, right, coming from particular moments or shapings or stories, if our desire to kind of push away from a kind of conscious rap is because of, like, there is a lot of labor, sacrifice, pain even, to turning around to face some of the patterns that we'd have to undo to dismantle that particular way of thinking. But there's also just kind of like this other package we sell that says, live fast, die young. And that makes the other side more appealing. The drugs, the fast life, the money, the girls, or whatever, right? So I thought about that too when hearing it, because the juxtaposition that I often see is that conscious rap is pushed against for how it creates the quality of complexity of thought that you have to sit with within yourself. It's not just like, oh, this thing about to satisfy you through a beat and you about to want to say what I'm saying because whatever. Like he's like, nah, actually sit and think about that and see how it feels somatically in your body. And that's the place where people like, nah, I ain't trying to do all that. I'm trying to pop me this and ignore the pain, but it takes us having that introspective work. And that's why I think conscious rap gets a kind of push in that way.
It's interesting you say that because we're recording this right after MLK Day, right? Mm-hmm. And he was a man who was like persecuted by the state. Then he was literally assassinated. But now his message is praised every year after being like pretty diluted to fit kind of like a vanilla racist narrative, right? So, and I can't help but think of that in relationship to Saba and Ghetto Sage, because Saba's talked in interviews about how there's a tendency for conscious rappers to be praised after they've died, right? Which is kind of like the same story.
Definitely.
And so I'm hearing threads of like sitting with like that discomfort of like, let's wait until someone has passed before we like take into account their message, but then we'll first dilute it before, you can really hear it. So
yeah, definitely. We're attracted to it where the attention is in a certain way. We know the things that feel just as rebellious as we want to be, to control that I can do this and you can't do nothing about it. Like playing with power, playing with fire, all that. We know those things. And then there's a different process that also means something for myself. And so when the person dies, it creates kind of like an emphasizing. A conscious rapper, I hear your message and he's spitting some real stuff. And like to hear the truth telling that they were doing. And I think that's the place that kind of gets sticky, because I think about that for people like Nipsey Hussle. I think about that for the Tupacs. I think about Biggie Smalls. Like I think about all of these rappers who, were gone too soon, and also, had some truth to tell, even if they were still talking about the other stuff too. They were young men. We know how the times were, and now we ain't gonna fake like we don't know how masculinity shaped them and what it meant. But I also think there's a really, really deep component to like how much we honor of the parts that touch us as a need for working change, for sure.
Yes, amen to everything you said. And like, where Saba's concerned, I really appreciate his like willingness to be real, and like, we can see that that's like something that's missing from like Rapper's Delight, for example, and that's like missing in a lot of ways from so much of mainstream hip hop. But to your point, hip hop doesn't always have to be an introspection, right? Like it started as, exactly. It started as a party music. People were there to dance. It was for the community to come together. And there's nothing wrong with party music. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And so what I question, to your point earlier, is like bravado always getting that mainstream airtime over honesty, right? Because like the truth is, bravado and honesty are both part of the hip hop culture that brought communities together in the first place all those decades ago, right? Like the fact that bravado and materialism topped the charts with no regard for the wholeness of hip hop culture is a function of masculinity. That's like that masculinity with a hard K, that performative masculinity that we're always talking about, right? Like the focus on men thriving in materialism and sex while discarding what else could be going on with their humanity.
For me, it's just always this thing about, again, this performative element of society, and this performative element in this instance of like performing these certain ideas versus the honesty, and how that kind of has this lingering effect. Again, not to qualify it as good or bad per se, but not being able to see the performative elements and then the effects thereof. I don't know. That's interesting to me.
Totally interesting. I agree.
Anyways, like this is dope. Like we're learning some history, some music stuff that I don't know nothing about. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go get my Pandora app out and gonna make some playlists and get to listening. No,
Pandora. First of all, I don't think that you can make you can't make playlists on Pandora. So have fun. But
hey,
thank you.
You don't know. I know Pandora, baby. I've been using Pandora way time.
I was gonna say maybe.
Yeah, I'm the old head that still uses Pandora. Leave me alone. Leave me alone.
I'm rocking with you. I like Pandora too. I haven't used it in a long time, but definitely still love that.
Taking us back to the 2000s out here,
No, but for real, I'm going to step away to learn a bit more. But after this break, Samantha and Nalo are going to take this conversation around music, gender, and accountability even further. Stay tuned.
Calling all bookworms and changemakers, get ready to dive into Book Club. That's BOOK, Beyond Our Own Knowledge, for those that don't know. Explore a world of captivating reads that explore diversity, foster empathy, and spark personal and professional growth. Join a vibrant community of readers with over 650 male leaders to date. Engage in thought-provoking discussions and expand your horizons. It's not just a book club, it's a journey towards a more inclusive future. Visit bookclubformen.com today and start your reading adventure with purpose. Book Club, where pages turn to progress and readership to leadership. Join the club and let's read for change.
All right, so welcome back. So, Nalo, you describe yourself as a masculinity scholar.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
For me, it means that I study how masculinity exists, not just in the world or historically, but in my own body, in the bodies of those that I visually accept as masculine, those who push up against what that visual looks like, and the sensory nature and understanding of masculinity that is beyond the limitations of maleness or manhood. So I feel like I offer a very nuanced lens on what masculinity is or what it can be, and the impact on even how we see it and perceive it in the world. So I offer that as, my offering to the conversation of gender and masculinity, especially for people like me who are not born male or under the umbrella of man and still understand my masculinity to be true and intact.
I love what you're saying because it points to masculinity as something that people can have and hold and like something that can be taken away.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much of that like, when it comes to like the performance of masculinity in general. It's like there's a lot going on about like how it's like a card that you can just like revoke from people. So
yeah, I think men created that. Patriarchal masculinities are their own thing. They're a competition, and I do not invest in such competition. So for me, that is a very man consequence. Like they must and are insatiable. Love my brothers, you feel me? I think men are beautiful beings. I think men have a lot of really powerful potential with what they've been offered in the world. But I definitely do not find myself, I don't find myself in a place where I understand the reason it has to be as competitive as it is. So masculinity for me doesn't discriminate on the body it manifests in, and it doesn't take away from masculinity in any other being. So it kind of, for masculinity to become a capitalistic currency, like you have enough of it, I don't, or you're a real this, like that's a man thing. And that's why I be like, patriarchy made y'all do what y'all doing. But I'm gonna offer you and invite you every time into some new possibilities. So
yeah, that's great groundwork to lay down for our conversation because I want to loop back to that, in the context of hip hop. We just talked about, the origin story of commercial hip hop, and I've heard you talk about, the intersection of hip hop and capitalism. I want to ask you how you feel like that's evolved over the years.
How capitalism and hip hop has evolved over the years?
What it's become.
Oh, interesting. I definitely think what power has meant has changed because, when you go through and you see billionaires like Jay-Z and, Dr. Dre and all these other rappers, then you get to the part where, hip hop actually spoke out about, issues and tried to make change and planted those seeds for what to do, to show love to each other, to show up for each other, all of that. And I feel like it's changed to say, like, I got what you don't got. Still telling them stories, but you can actually be a lot more pretentious and perform, like, rather than actually embody the stories that you're talking about. Like, I thought about that with, what's his name from Migos, Cardi B's husband.
Offset.
Yeah, Offset. And he's very much, like, in the music, he's still talking about, sleeping with all these women and not caring about feelings. I'm like, you married to Cardi B. That's not how you acting at home, boy. You didn't transition to say what a husband's rap would sound like. You still ran with the narrative that sells. And I'm like, with that being sustained that way, I think it continues to yield a particular way that hip hop has to, formulate itself rather than, making room for whose stories those are and making room for the ability to transcend or change stories also.
Hell yeah. One thing that I was going to bring up is like, I really see this bridge, right? This bridge between hip hop capitalism and the performance of masculinity, or masculinity as we call it, right? With hip hop producers, right? Like, I'm thinking specifically of someone like Diddy, who was actually one of the first people to document like the making of a hip hop band on TV, like reality TV, who recently recently made headlines because he literally just paid some of his artists from like, what are we, like 2024? So like
That's
after
right.
years of exploitation, he paid all of these artists right around the time that he and his companies actually were being sued for sexual assault and related charges, right? Which he then settled within like literally 24 hours. But right before that, Diddy was just like acclaimed and applauded for everything he had done for hip hop, supposedly. And everybody was juiced that he was a billionaire. So it's like, all this just kind of feels very connected in terms of the performance of that patriarchal masculinity that you were talking about.
Totally, because the control aspect is there, and money offers access to controlling things. And so, like, his avenue has been that he's a very smart, hustling businessman, and he understood the music industry, learned from his mistakes real young, and was able to build something strong. So we know that he knows how to make money, and that, that whole landscape. But I think we also can use, his life as an example of why it's important to, be mindful about the impact of wealth in a certain capacity, in abundance of wealth, and what that means for the ability to make decisions when you can play with the relationship to risk when you have enough money to get out of prison. You can play with your relationship to risk when you can pay off the person you assaulted within 24 hours, right? Because life is short, and there are very much so other avenues that those victims probably could take also, but it doesn't change the fact that like the harm has been done. There is typically a price, especially if you're a person who's coming from any kind of poverty or wants this to be over with and just done with. Like, money is the quick solution. So, you kind of recognize that power dynamic that is very much so connected to masculinity in men because of the way that you're expected to take care of it, right? And not actually stand in the consequences that you bear because you impacted someone, you sexually assaulted someone. Yes, there should be a price, and there should be other consequence too. He shouldn't actually be where he is. So,
and Diddy is still in his Miami mansion, just chilling, so it's like, what is valued here, really? We talked a little bit about like the impact of, capitalism and class kind of being intertwined in popular music, kind of in certain ways impacting the performers, right? How, producers leverage their power, their control, their access. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the more kind of discrete ways that impacts the listeners, right? The consumers of said music and said culture.
that's so good. I think influence is the most powerful thing. I mean, just from what social media is, I think the example of how to do things or how to be together and all that is very much so a spell in the power of the hands of music. And it's why you can get, a little 2-3-year-old that can memorize the lyrics to a song. Like, we are rhythm bodies. Our first language is nonverbal. And so being able to somatically connect through music sound, like that is our way. And I think as human beings, like recognizing what to do in moments where like we realize or actualize that kind of power and realize the power of that influence, especially through music, then we're not asking people to just go, you should be raising your kids. Like, we think about stuff like the impact of what we say through music and how we actually, even amongst each other, I ain't gonna say adults you can't influence adults. I feel like we are constantly transitioning through different choices to figure out who we are, what we're doing in life, all of that. And a lot of that stuff comes from what we perceive from media, and music being a very vast body of influence that I think definitely generates new ways to think about things and new ways to practice storytelling. So it's a very powerful medium in general, and I think that takes some responsibility for sure.
Yes. And you're a self-professed and an active accountability strategist, right? And this is exactly that responsibility that you're talking about, right? It's like, we talk a lot about accountability and compassion on this show. and how they should exist in the same space. When it comes to redefining manhood, like as an individual, right? Like non-prescriptively, like as an act of truth for somebody. So can you talk a little bit about what that might look like, accountability within the lens of masculinity?
I think that accountability for masculine people starts at the impact masculinity has had on anything, right? So if we talk about who has led the charge for the influence of what masculinity should look like, whether it's something you do, something you have, or something you are, all those questions kind of being something socialized by men, that's where I started to ask questions like that. So there would be, who and how have men been impactful in the world? What are the things that we can look back and say under men's decision making, under men's, rule, power, whatever, what has happened, right? And being able to learn about those impacts starts to help us understand things like, why is there a movement for domestic violence? Or why is there a movement specifically centering women? Why is that? Like, I think about this so often, because when it comes to masculinity, we already are thinking in masculine, socialized, patriarchal masculinities to defend it, right? Yeah. To defend. Like, I need to push up against what you're saying because I'm masculine and you saying something about me.
Well, I'm just excited about what you're saying, because it's like one of the things that's been on my mind a lot, right, has been how, not just masculine people defend it, right? Like, a lot of folks who are feminine are defending their femininity within the lens of that specific masculinity. So it's like, if you threaten that masculinity, the lens through which, or the framework in which that exists, that prism, actually, they were talking about, in your TED Talk, it's like, if you threaten that, then you threaten me. You threaten who I'm up against, right? Because we have to defend this like binary at all costs, because there's no framework for where we're going, right? To your earlier point about, how we move forward, how we move on. One of the things that you said that I loved is, and honestly, it made me look in the mirror and I was like, Samantha, like, how are you doing this? And the answer is you're not. You said, I think you were on the Let's Talk Bruh podcast, and you were like, we have to be, we talk about like liberation and all of that. And it's like, you have to understand that liberation, like, how are you divorcing yourself from capitalism, essentially? You said it like in a much better, like, amazing poetic way. But you were, no, but you know what I mean? Like, you were talking about, like, we have to understand that we're talking about doing away with capitalism and how exploitative it is. But where are we going after that? This is the model we have. So I guess what I want to ask you is like, what do we have to gain from giving those things up, right? Like, and specifically masculinity being so tied into like capitalism, the way that we understand it, like, what does it look like for us to like give that up? And what do we have to gain?
That's such a great question. I think number one thing to gain is our imagination back, because patriarchy has kind of sold us this idea about ourselves, about how we relate to each other, about even procreation, forcing women into the imagery of thinking that they're here to bear children and that's it. Or forcing, us into thinking that we shouldn't have relationship with women if we don't have relationship with men, or whatever the things are that we're socialized to respond from. I think what we have to gain is not just liberation as some jargon being thrown around, not just freedom as some jargon that I need you to be satiated by your own imagining around freedom. If you don't have no idea of freedom, you're going to think patriarchy's limitation of an imagination is what's for you. You're going to be the realm of when you get to the line where it crosses over into what you don't understand because it's no longer patriarchal. Ask yourself why. Stay curious instead of rigid. Like, that's the anti-patriarchy, because what is a man's response, right, to these things when challenged, when being told something against what they already firmly believe? It is to fight. It is to push. It is not to hear and understand so that there is some respect for difference that might be possible. But masculinity has to change in our ability to see it juxtaposed with care. Stay vulnerable. What does it mean to be a masculine person and be vulnerable? in the sense that not men are not doing it, but the dominant culture of what manhood has been abuse of power and literally like a continued cause for a performance that's not even serving men.
Yes. Yes. All of this.
I think about this a lot. Trust me, this is great.
Yes. And I mean, I feel like, and that's the thing. It's like, translating that to art we consume when we think about like the Jay-Z's and the Damon Dashes and the Dr. Dre's of the world, right? Who are moving with impunity, through their abuses, through their exploitation, and then being like, it's like everything is fine because they're rich. Everything is fine. Like we're just going to let everything pass because they're billionaires, right? And so it's like you said, it's a lack of imagination. We live in a capitalistic world. The only thing to aspire to is more money. Like Beyonce said, best revenge is your paper. It's like, there are other ways to avenge ourselves, but maybe not in this context. I don't know.
I mean, and I think I can have respect for the fact that when you are like taught and it just beat into you in a certain way, like patriarchy is powerful. Capitalism is powerful. And when you see the game board, and someone says, you can have a piece of that game or you can push against the idea of that game. And you know what I'm saying? It chips away at your ability to sustain the strength of values. If it doesn't actually mean more to you than actually having that $1 million. Like how many people could we shut up if we said, I'll give you this 10 mil right now to never say nothing about anti-blackness, never say nothing about, oppression, capitalism. How many people would take the 10 mil? So I think it comes to a point where I think we have to start at the smaller place of ourselves to be introspective enough. And, obviously everyone, not just masculine people, but specifically masculine people, because there is a connection in how we're socialized. There's a connection to abusive power that we have to be willing to accept in order to even learn to divest from, because we still at the place of defending that, there's harm attached to it. No, there must be a place where you stop and say, there's a culture of harm connected to the person I am. Does that mean it's my fault? No, it doesn't. Does that mean I should die? No, it does not. Does it though mean I need to be aware of myself and aware of the consequences of people like me have caused, such that I can understand why women are fearful, why trans women are still trying to figure out how to stay alive, why anyone who's different or feminine as a man, even heterosexual, straight, like feminine men still get flack if they're not, embodying a certain put your chest out and be dominant over other men. Like, why is your life goal to be dominant? Why do men who understand their power need to use their power so fully to the maximum they can use it all the time? You're not tired? You don't want to pause and get rest or love yourself or get a hug? Like, I want you to do something else than that. So yeah, definitely something to think about.
Yeah. But I just feel like you really there's like this conversation around like systemic accountability. And like what I'm really hearing is like, it's like an individual effort and it's a choice every moment of every day to choose to kind of like question where all these like systems impact ourselves, like impact our lives, and like kind of seep in to like those minute interactions that we have with ourselves and the people around us. Like it's just like a choice every single time. So
and continue to make that choice is flexing a muscle that we are learning to turn off, and that's to be comfortable. Like to learn to be uncomfortable and to be with discomfort is top way. Like it's the most anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchal response you can have, because what patriarchy teaches us is that we should get back to comfort. Even therapy strategies are like, of course you did that thing, like I understand that. And also tell a person that you're not absolved of the consequence of your impacts. Like there need to be ways that we work to restore each other and to teach each other that the consequences of our actions are not things that we can flee from just because we have the option to, right? A lot of the difference between even what it means to be a victim of, the system I can't stand, which is cancel culture. And also, moving into, what I hope to see, which is transformative justice or community-oriented justice, is like the only difference between a person who's canceled and a person who's not is the grace of the person who chose not to put your business on the internet. So like, let's also be able to recognize those moments where we did get the room to grow. And what does it mean to make a different decision next time, right? So I think that's a huge thing for masculine people, because we can very easily abuse power in that way and just make the decision we want to make instead of making the decision that is life-sustaining or relationship-sustaining.
So where can the people find more of this amazing, illuminating, wisdom of yours? Like, where can they find you?
I'm going to be honest. I am a floating genius, I guess you could say, in some way. So, you can follow me on Instagram at Nalo Darling. I put a lot of my work there, and I am building a few projects I've been working on for a while and hoping to, kind of plant myself at a foundation for people to reach me, book me, or anything. But ideation is something I believe it's a kind of genius that I think we all embody if we can sit and actually sift through the details of why we believe a thing, ask the right questions, and make sense of strategizing new ways for being with ourselves, with each other, and interact with every other living thing here. Like that's the ultimate way that I believe we begin to unbraid the kind of intertwined way that capitalism has taught us that that's what community means.
Man, all this music talk and pandoring and even gender. One song is definitely coming to mind.
Which is...
Da, 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 da.
That is not
There's going to be a wedding officiant soon, guys.
Wow, yeah, you heard it here first. This was not a bit. This is definitely happening, and it was cinched on the podcast, so well done.
Well, if you want to find out more about my officiant services or actually just learn more about these connections between music and masculinity, head over to masculinitypod.com for additional resources. Also, we'll be passing more links on our socials. That's at masculinitypod. Always with a hard K, and that's on all the platforms.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who came through on our last episode of Beneath the Mask on Instagram Live. We had a great time with Jake and Veronica, so shout out to the Podnet fam.
Stay tuned next week, where Samantha will be back on the gram with our next episode of Beneath the Mask. Until then, I'm your boy, Ramoy George Phillip the First.
And I'm Samantha Nzesi. Thank you for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.
Listen, I'm telling you, I love allergy season for that one reason. I was like, if I'm gonna make the best of this moment, and I'm going to enjoy the rasp.
Okay, yes. Like all my recording engagements, please, during raspy season. Thank you so much.
Please.